Well, thank you for joining us today. Today we've got a couple of special guests for you in Chef's Chat. I've got Jamie Clews and I've also got Brian Preston. So Jamie, can you tell me where you work and what you do?
Yeah, so I currently work for Metcalf Catering Equipment. Probably been in hospitality now for almost 30 years. Added it up the other day, surprised myself. Um, but yeah, so I do a lot of work around sort of food waste reduction as well. We're sort of running the Respect the Ingredient campaign at the moment.
Fantastic, fantastic. We'll hear more about that as we go along. And Brian.
Oh, I started at the catering corps back in the late 70s. Came out from there. Was a head chef in Harrogate for a little while, and then ran my own business for 23 years. Then came into the care sector sort of 10, 12 years ago. Never done anything like this before, so it was a real eye opener. Yeah, good stuff though.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, well, we've got, I think, 6 questions for you both. And I know that you've got special interests in the catering industry. So some, might have a longer answer and some might have a shorter answer. But anyway, in your roles, have you seen an increase in the demand of vegetarian and vegan options? And if so, what do you think is the reasons for this? So I'm going to go to Brian first of all, and then I'll come over to Jamie.
This was a hard one for me, and I think it's down to our clientele, because we're ex-forces, and they've been all over the world, and they've literally had to eat what is available. They've a tendency not to go down the vegetarian route specifically. They do have the vegetarian meals that come along with a normal Sunday roast. They'll have a cauliflower cheese and all that sort of stuff, but it's not something that they do home in on. We do get a few now that will head down a mushroom stroganoff or a stir fry or something like that, but not necessarily. So I think it is coming. It's definitely coming in a few years' time, but the clientele that I'm sitting with at the minute, it's not their thing really. The families are coming in with vegetarians and the grandchildren are vegetarian and vegan, etc., but they themselves aren't.
Right.
I think it's just where our clientele sit in their age group.
Yeah, very much so. I think it can be the case. Jamie, how about you?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I was actually talking to my wife about something similar to this the other day. That I was talking to someone years ago saying it's not long until care homes will be serving food on wooden boards. It was trendy, and as those people are used to eating that particular food, at some point they're going to be in care. And I think you've seen a huge jump in sort of vegetarian and vegan food for the sort of that sort of mid-age range, and at some point they are going to be in the care setting, so it's definitely coming through 100%. I mean, I remember the days when I started in the kitchen, vegetarian food was never, it was a thing you put on the menu just in case. Now you have entire restaurants that are vegetarian or vegan, or you're getting a lot more thought and consideration going into these dishes. Even to a point, I was talking to someone the other day, and he has a vegetarian vegan kebab house, and he had complaints from his customers that they thought he was serving them meat.
Wow.
Even though he wasn't. So it's jumped a long way.
But yeah, very much it has changed, and it is, as you both say, it's something that is definitely coming. We've noticed at Vegetarian for Life there's a lot more demand in people inquiring about it, and care chefs and managers. But yeah, I guess it does depend on who your clients base are. So next question is going to go to Jamie first of all, if that's all right. Now, this Vegetarian for Life, VFL, I'm shortening it, does offer a range of resources to support caterers and older people with training and recipes and things like that. And what do you think the advantages are of having additional training for chefs in vegetarian and vegan food?
I think it's important because a lot of people still don't fully understand the sort of the vegan side of things, especially. I think it's still within a certain group of people that still think vegetarian food is the sideline. And can be quite difficult sometimes to look at something that you can serve to everybody and no one really sort of notices vegetarian or vegan. I remember, Alex, you did the tofu scrambled egg before. And there's many people that if you had that, you probably wouldn't know the difference. So I think it's good for the chefs and the sort of food handlers to get experience, and more so, I think it's best for them to get confidence, because I think once you've got that confidence in maybe using some different ingredients or understanding how you can tweak an ingredient to make it tastier, or more nutritious, I think that really helps. So yeah, training, 100%. For me, it's more confidence. For a lot of people.
Thank you. Brian, have you anything to add about that?
No, that was more or less what I was going to say. I think when you've done some training around stuff like this, it does build up your confidence fantastically. And there used to be a panic when somebody would come in and they were vegan or vegetarian. Oh my God, what are we going to feed them? We haven't got this and we haven't got that. And that's not there anymore. People know that they need to keep a few little bits and pieces in stock, and then they can make something vegan or vegetarian, and not worry about it. It's not that horror story that it used to be, when somebody turned up at your restaurant and wanted something like that, and you don't go down the omelette route, or it's a plate of steamed vegetables or something like that you used to have.
I can remember those days.
Yeah.
I can remember and when I went to a restaurant, I would have to phone ahead to say, can you make something? And I'd be grateful for whatever the
yeah.
But
precisely.
Things really have changed. Do you see any benefits to either of you, whichever, in developing more vegetarian and vegan options?
Definitely, because you look at the ingredients in a different way, and then you realize that you might be doing a meat dish, but you can incorporate some of those spices and those things that you would use in a vegan or a vegetarian dish into that as well, and it just gives you so much more scope to think outside the box a bit on what we're doing and what we're flavoring it with, and how much extra little bits, protein and things can we get in by playing the vegan card on it, so to speak, which is great. And I think it's well worth doing, and to have a bit of training on both of them. You've got your classical chef, but then you've got your vegan chef. Mix them up a bit, and you can do all sorts of stuff, and you do think differently.
Brilliant, thank you. Jamie, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think once you have more of an understanding of vegetarian and vegan food, it does open up lots more options. And like Brian said, even if it is just a side dish to something, but also I think if you can do it properly, it can very easily become the main dish. And it rather than being something just for those that are vegetarian or vegan, if it's done correctly, it will appeal to the biggest meat eaters out there. And I think that can make a huge difference. And it's like we said earlier, vegetarian food is not the steamed veg, the last minute thought that it used to be. There were some fantastic foods out there, and it's just that understanding of how to use them properly and get the best flavors out of them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now then, I'm going to come to Brian first with this one, if I may. If someone needs, as another person may need food to be fortified or nutritionally dense, what sort of line would you go down if you were supporting a vegetarian or a vegan with that? So like small portions.
I think the hard bit with this one is the fact that if you are serving IDSI levels and they are vegan or vegetarian, the volume of quality protein that you can get in there does become difficult. because they're only eating small amounts. You may, at some point, depending on there's so many variables on this, but you may have to look at a vegan protein powder at some point if you've got past the nuts and the ground nuts and the seeds that you can get into things. But I was thinking about this earlier on today, and I was thinking, how do we fortify the savoury course? And actually the sweet course, if you're going to do a dessert, is far easier to fortify with all sorts of things that you can add into an NACC level 4 dessert and things like that. And it's easier to almost get your protein and those extra bits in the dessert, which they're going to eat. Well, knowing what my residents are like, they develop a sweet tooth. You can't get the main course down them, but you can get 3 puddings down them. So why not give them 3 fortified puddings? You can work around it that way.
Yeah, it's an absolutely important point to think of the meal in its entirety, rather than the main be the source of protein or whatever, and the pudding is apple cobbler or whatever.
Even the snacks that you give them through the day, those little extra bits that you give them through the day, you can put a spoon of almond powder in. You can sort of get some flax seeds and things in, and all those little bits that you can get into it in small amounts through a day.
Anything to add, Jamie?
I think a lot of it also comes down to how it's cooked. Just looking at a simple broccoli, for example, if you cook it for 2 hours, the nutritional value of that is going to be minimal. So it's just looking at how you can do that. I use a lot of nutritional yeast at home, which adds that amazing sort of nutty sort of cheesy flavor, and you're getting all the extra sort of B12s in there as well. So I think it can be quite clever. And again, this is where I think having that understanding of these vegan vegetarian alternatives, like Brian said, can come in to add additional nutrients to other dishes that person might be having. So if, for example, within the care setting, like Brian said, a lot of his residents prefer meat, by having that nutritional yeast maybe in a cauliflower cheese or something like that as a side dish is going to boost more nutrition. So it's that understanding that you can, not forgetting about that part, and as exactly like Brian said, bringing in seeds and nuts throughout snacks and things throughout the day is a great option to get more in there, really.
Very much so. I mean, things like nuts are high in calories, but also high in protein. But ordinary things like peas, we kind of look at them as being, this thing at the back of the freezer. But puree, they can be added to all sorts of stews and casseroles and things, just to add a little bit of protein without having any thought. And then you've got protein rich powders, so you can get alternatives to powdered milk. So all the things that you would add powdered milk to, whether it be the custard or the milkshakes and smoothies and things like that, you can get vegan versions of that, which certainly add a lot of protein. The next question is kind of focusing a little bit deeper into texture modified foods, and I'm going to come to Jamie first with that. Now, obviously with IDSI, which is a way of standardizing, a language of standardizing how things should be when they're served in terms of their consistency. What advice have you got, Jamie, for somebody who has to have a modified diet, both in nutrition, but also, which we did touch on, but also in terms of presentation? Because I do see people who are not familiar with this and they say, "Oh, I wouldn't want to serve that." Well, it can be tricky.
I think colour is key, and this actually comes back to sort of that fruit and vegetables. It can be so much easier to get that colour onto a plate. If you take your broccoli and not overcook it, for example, you're going to get that brighter colour, greens, and it looks more edible. By moving away from the meats again and then coming back to the vegetables, beetroots blended down can look beautiful. And just putting that little addition, there's one thing that I've seen a few colleagues do in the past with tomatoes, and putting that little bit of spinach on the top as a pureed level 4, for example, to give that pop of green colour like the vine. And it's those little things. Level 4 spinach is amazing product. It's very cheap. It's very full of nutrients, and it's a great garnish to go on top. You know, you see many people sprinkling herbs, for example, over something by having the little dots of green maybe on top of a stew, or putting little cherry tomatoes from the cherry passato or something like that. So for me, color, because you haven't got height to work with, you can't do anything with the texture. You've got the flavor, which is key, but I think the appearance is the first thing that's going to get someone interested in that food. And for me, piping bags, molds, if you have to use them, because they are needed in some cases, but sort of piping bags, molds, use what you've got in the kitchen, and just think outside the box. A nice way to do it is to bring up a picture of a level 7 regular meal of what you're preparing, and actually almost try and copy that with your level 4, because sometimes you forget how a mushroom looks on a plate. You know, how a tomato looks on a plate. You forget that, and rather than just do dollops, maybe try and make it look like a plum tomato or cherry vine tomato or whatever it might be. So yeah, for me the key is the color priority, really. I think if you, for presentation purposes, get someone, you know, interested in it.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, the colour, because once you start blending things, they can go down the road of looking, should we say, earth tones.
Very pale.
Brian, anything to add for that?
Yeah, very much similar, and it's those colours on the plate. It's having a plate that's big enough that you can put the stuff on with a little bit of space around each thing, so that you actually see the shape. And it's not just all a bit of a blur, especially for those whose sight's not particularly great in the, you know, the 70s, 80s. They can pick those colours out. Stuff like red cabbage and things works fantastically. You've got such rich colours. You've got sort of 4 basic colours when you start to blend things down. You've got the browns, the greens, the oranges, and the whites, and they're all slight variations of that. And that's what you tend to end up with. And like Jamie said, if you can make it look as close to a tomato as you can, fine. Some, you know, keep those little bits of green on top and stuff, but it is down to that. You've got to make them interested in tasting it, and you're not going to do that if it doesn't look appetizing.
Yeah, it's very much so. But and also maybe the serving plate on what it's put on can make quite a difference. I was thinking about height. You know, if you serve something in a taller vessel, then you may be able to get that sort of Knickerbocker glory thing going, and still have the height rather than kind of piping it. But yeah, it's some very interesting suggestions.
Yeah, okay. Pop a dessert in a little stemmed glass as opposed to a plastic tumbler where it's low. They can see the colours in the side of the glass if you're going to layer something, and just make it look interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Now then, Brian, this is going to be to you first. I'm going to go to you, Jamie, in a moment. Brian, you are the current holder of Care Chef of the Year. So
not for very long. Not for very long now.
Not for very long. You're still in basking in the glory, and you won that. And I was lucky enough to get into the final last year. So was at the presentation evening, and it was a fantastic thing to do. Now, if you were to do a vegan option, if you were going to enter in the future, what things would you go down? Now, for those that are unfamiliar with the competition, chefs are given 90 minutes to prepare 2 courses and 3 servings. It needs to be nutritionally balanced. You also need to have a sponsor's product in there. That's quite, you know, an easy thing to do. But the budget this year was £4.50, which it had gone up from previous years, where when I entered, I was sort of scraping about all sorts of savings here and there and everywhere. But if you're going to do a vegan option, or what road would you go down, Brian?
I thought long and hard about this because I'd seen you working before, and I was thinking, you know, what works, what doesn't work, and how would you go about presenting it to make it look as though it's a really good dish. And I came up with, I would possibly go down something like a vegan version of a a little pot sticker dumpling type thing.
Oh, right.
Possibly filled with spices, nut purees. You know, you could do a combination of them, so you've got 3 different ones, possibly with a little risotto or some pulses, something like that. That's where I was going, to give a good skill, you know, a good showing off some good skills, and then, you know, having a nice meal at the end of it. Because when you're doing the vegan stuff in the competition bit, there tends to be an awful lot of chopping, as opposed to when you're making a meat style dish. You don't sort of seem to have that volume of work. And I thought that the little pot stickers, you've got all sorts of things going on with them, and you can mess about with those for all sorts of things, all sorts of fillings, and how you would do that, and possibly finish with something on a warm summer pudding with like a coconut ice cream. They do some fantastic vegan ice creams now.
Lovely.
Or the inevitable vegan brownie, which is always a good one.
It used to be carrot cake. That was the well, prior to that, fruit salad. But yeah, no, vegan brownie. Oh, that sounds lovely. I might enter next year. So thanks for those tips.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Jamie, if you were to do a vegan option, what would your line of thinking for this?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this one earlier. I mean, I'm quite lucky at the moment. Where I live at the moment, I've got a very large polytunnel, and I've got roughly about 120, 140 different varieties of fruit and veg growing. So for me at the moment, I just go outside and whatever's in season. You know, I'm just eating from there. So for me, I think I would be focusing around sort of the food that's in season, because you get those amazing flavors. Like I've been eating kale for the last 2 months, and I'm still not sick of it because it tastes phenomenal. So I think I'd probably stick to keep it simple. Use those fresh, natural sort of flavors that are coming from the vegetables, rather than try and sort of overcomplicate it, and try and keep to sort of mixing up the sort of textures. So, you know, maybe doing something like, I've got some really nice kohlrabi at the moment. I don't know, would I be allowed to take my own stuff to keep the cost down? I'm not sure if I would.
I don't know whether you would. I did think about why you
might
were
be cheap.
saying
Yeah, I might be cheating.
Stealing it out of your own garden, I don't think works.
No, might be breaking the budget there slightly.
Yeah.
But possibly using like the herbs to try and incorporate some flavors into there as well. Adding in some fermentation, which is cheap. Very cheap to make, but you can enhance the flavors phenomenally. I've currently got like a cabbage and parsnip fermentation, which is very cheap, gets that nutrition in there as well. And then dessert, could I forage to keep the cost down? I'm not sure if I could do that either.
This is cheating, Jamie.
So I could get the black. There's so many blackberries around at the moment, and the apples are just coming into season as well. So yeah, again, I think I'd keep it simple and try and tweak some dishes, like we said, you know, to do a crumble, for example, by just swapping out the butter for a vegan butter is phenomenal. You wouldn't notice the difference.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. No, so I think that would be it. I'd try and make the dish not seem vegetarian and vegan, but naturally be that anyway, without really knowing that that's what you're eating. And I think that for me is the key to get more people sort of involved. You know, as soon as you put a V next to a dish, people are, oh no, I don't want to eat that, even though there is no difference. So yeah, for me, probably, you know, roasted hot cold salad, something like that, crumble or something, but keep it seasonal local. For me, that's the key.
That sounds good advice. The downside of that is that you put your menu in to cook in June, and then you've got the final to get through, and that's in October. So I think I put strawberries in mine, and something else. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to get those in October. Well, you are, but not grown in the UK. But yeah, no, it's fantastic, and enjoy the rest of until October, when you'll have to hand your crown back, Brian. But yeah, some great ideas there. Now the last question to both of you really is, what advice would you give to up-and-coming chefs that maybe have not considered a career in the care sector? I mean, many chefs would like, I want to work in a top restaurant, but not necessarily in a care sector. What advice would you give to people that are setting off on their careers? Brian, do you want to?
Look again, because doing this for me for the last 10 years has been absolutely fantastic. I've learned so much, and I have a life. I'm not, at work at 10 o'clock every night. You have a home life, you have all those things that I didn't used to have with my own business when I was working every weekend, and all those things that go with it. And care is not what it used to be. We've moved on. What our residents expect and what we try to give them is far beyond what it used to be like, and it's expected. And there's no reason why it shouldn't continue to be even better than it is. But it takes young chefs to push the boundaries. To come in and say, we're not doing it like this anymore, we're going to do it this way. And I think that's, you can do that. I know the big corporate people they've practiced on how they like it and all the rest of it. But if you find there's lots of little homes out there that really do like to push the boundaries and see what they can do.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's an important point about home life balance. If you're sort of starting off in a career, then in the trade, you may think, well, that's fine, it's exciting, but as you get a little bit older and maybe children come along, you have got lots of demands, which it's still got demands in the care sector, but maybe it's slightly easier. Jamie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, for me, I've always been passionate about trying to get people into the care setting, because so many times I work with people in catering colleges, and I know 3, 4, 5 years they're not going to be in the industry anymore because they've gone down this route of restaurants. The one thing that sort of came to my mind was most of us get into cooking because we enjoyed cooking for our family and our friends at home, and that sort of triggered us, oh, maybe I could do this for a living. I think the only environment you're ever going to carry that on is in a care setting. You're cooking for a small number of people that you will get to know and you will get to care for. Plus the other side of it, like Brian said, the food's not how people think it used to be. And it's one of the few sectors where you're cooking something different every day. You're generally making your own desserts. Many cases you're making cakes, biscuits. You're doing a whole variety of things. If you go work in a restaurant, you'll probably cook the same dish for the next 3 months, and that's as far as you're going to go, until you work your wet bladder. It's not fantastic. And also the benefits, everything you get in the care setting. So I do seriously think it's an industry, it's a whole sector where upcoming chefs really need to look at and consider, and just go visit a home and see what they're doing. But I would much rather eat in many care homes than a lot of restaurants out there.
Yeah, it's such an overlooked in many ways industry. When I've been to colleges and I've spoken about working in care, and most of the youngsters know they want to go down this route or that route, but not that. But for all the chefs that I've met that do work in care, they've just got lots of positive things to say about that, and not a lot of negative. So it's definitely something to consider. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me this afternoon. Have you got any last comments? Do you want to say anything?
No, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been good.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I just want to thank you both for answering, giving some great answers. And if you've watched this and you've enjoyed it and you'd like to see some other guest chefs in, please do let us know. And if you're not already subscribed, please do so. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.